The quarterback room in Berea flipped on itself today, and I watched every second of it happen in real time. Day 10 of Cleveland's training camp, the 6th straight day the Browns have been out there in full pads, no rest, no half-speed reps, just grinding through what the coaching staff calls the dog days of camp. This is the stretch where installs are supposed to be finished and execution is supposed to take over. Right before practice, the offensive coordinator stood in front of us and said something that had me genuinely fired up before a single snap was even taken. Shedeur Sanders, he told us, was going to get the majority of first-team reps today. Installs are done. The Bears' preseason opener is right around the corner. This was supposed to be the day the rookie finally got his real runway with the ones. The day the depth chart conversation started tilting in a new direction. That is not what happened. Not even close. Not. From the very first play of team drills, Deshaun Watson was out there under center with the starters, and he stayed there. He opened the period connecting with tight end Harold Fannin on a completion right off the top, and from that moment forward, the rep sheet told a completely different story than the one we'd all been promised less than an hour earlier. I sat there watching it unfold and felt that familiar knot in my stomach. The one every Browns fan who's been paying close attention to this quarterback competition knows all too well by now. Because this wasn't a rotation. This wasn't Sanders getting a handful of one's reps mixed in with reps for the twos. This was close to a total reversal, and it kept going period after period. 7-on-7s came next, and again, Watson was up first with the starters. I remember thinking, don't tell me we're watching a repeat of old Cleveland quarterback mismanagement, because in that moment, that's exactly what it started to feel like. Watson worked through his cadence, found completions, kept operating with the one unit like the plan we'd been told about that morning never existed in the first place. And I wasn't the only person in that building noticing it. Reporters who cover this team every single day were saying the same thing out loud, openly wondering why a coordinator would tell everyone Sanders was getting the bulk of the reps and then hand nearly all of them to Watson instead. One of them put it about as plainly as you can put it, saying people were confused and hoping for an explanation. I was hoping for the exact same thing. I'm still hoping for it now. Here's where it got worse if you're pulling for Sanders. Later in that same session, it was Dillon Gabriel leading the second-team offense to close out a period, not Sanders, which further shrunk the number of live reps the guy who was supposedly the headline of the day actually saw. Then came the red zone period, and Watson found rookie receiver Denzel Boston for a touchdown. Exactly the kind of connection that makes you start wondering if that second-round pick is quietly becoming Watson's guy in scoring situations rather than Sanders. Every one of these moments stacked on top of the last, and by the time the red zone work wrapped up, I was frustrated. Genuinely frustrated, because I understand what reps actually mean during training camp. They're not just practice snaps you check off a list. They're trust, they're rhythm. They're a coaching staff quietly telling an entire locker room who they're leaning on when the games start to count. Now I need to be fair here, because the full story isn't as simple as Sanders got buried and forgotten. When you actually sit down and run the numbers from the tracker, it gets a lot more interesting and honestly, a lot more confusing than the surface-level narrative suggests. Sanders finished the day 16 of 20, 4 incompletions total, across an entire practice. That's an elite completion rate by any measure, camp reps or real football. He connected on a hitch route to Tylan Wallace and then came right back and delivered a nice throw to Raheem Sanders. And every time the ball was actually in his hands, he looked sharp, decisive, completely in control of what he was doing out there. Watson, who worked almost the entire practice with the starters, finished 23 of 34 with 4 touchdowns. That's solid veteran-caliber production. No argument there. But it's also a noticeably lower completion percentage than the rookie who barely got on the field managed to put up. Gabriel went 5 of 12 in his limited window of work, and Dylan Green didn't factor into the numbers at all on the day. So when you actually stack it all up side by side, Sanders was statistically the most efficient quarterback on that field, and he got the fewest opportunities of anyone to prove it. That contradiction right there is exactly what makes this whole situation so hard to read cleanly. Because either this was a coaching staff quietly testing how a young quarterback responds when the plan changes on him without warning, which is a real evaluation tool teams use all the time, or it's a coordinator who told the media one thing and then did something entirely different on the actual practice field, which is a far more concerning problem for anybody trying to trust what this staff says publicly. I don't think we get to know for certain which one it is just from watching a single practice unfold. But I do think it matters enormously for how we interpret everything else coming out of this camp over the next several days. Think about what's genuinely at stake here. The Bears' preseason game is coming up fast, and Kevin Stefanski told reporters directly that this is the closest thing to an actual live game situation the coaching staff will get before they start truly separating this competition. He said the staff had already discussed the quarterback situation the night before, that they'd keep discussing it through today and tomorrow, and that by Monday, they'll start really focusing in on who's actually going to start, how they're going to divide reps going forward, and where things stand at the position overall. That's not a throwaway comment. That's a head coach telling you, on the record, that the next several days are exactly when this decision starts to crystallize into something real. Which means today's rep distribution isn't just a random Tuesday deep in August. It's either a genuine signal about where Watson's experience and arm currently sit within this quarterback room, or it's a deliberate gut check thrown at Sanders on purpose, specifically to see how he'd handle having the rug pulled out from under him after being told the opposite that morning. And if it was a gut check, he passed it. Whatever was actually going on schematically behind the scenes, whatever message the staff was trying to send through the rep sheet, Sanders didn't let it rattle him one bit. He came out and stayed efficient every single time his number was called, which tells me something real about where his head is at right now. This is a guy who reporters and coaches keep describing as locked in no matter what circumstances get thrown at him, and today was as close to a live, unscripted test of that description as camp has given us so far. You can question the coaching decisions here. You can question the communication between the staff and the media. But you genuinely cannot question how Sanders responded once the plan changed on him without any warning. There's also a quieter storyline buried underneath all of this frustration, and it's about development, not just about who's winning the competition on any given day. The staff talked today about how much Sanders has grown in his pre-snap and post-snap process specifically, pointing to his ability to recognize coverage before the ball is even snapped and then continue adjusting once the play actually unfolds in front of him. They pointed to his eyes and his feet finally working together instead of against each other, and to something that sounds small on the surface but really isn't, him learning to check the ball down and take the safe option instead of forcing a low percentage throw into tight coverage. For a quarterback who's consistently described as a natural playmaker, someone who's always hunting for the next splash play, learning to throw the ball away or eat a check down instead of eating a loss is a real developmental milestone, maybe one of the most important ones a young quarterback can hit. Explosive, super competitive quarterbacks with total confidence in their own arm talent often resist that particular lesson the longest, because every instinct in their body tells them to trust their arm over the math in front of them. If Sanders is actually internalizing that lesson now, this early in his development, that's a meaningful sign regardless of who ends up getting the bulk of the one's reps on any single Tuesday in August. So where does that leave the actual quarterback battle heading into the back half of this week? Honestly, murkier than it looked this morning before practice even started. Watson getting the bulk of the true starter reps today, especially with the Bears' preseason game bearing down on this coaching staff, could genuinely mean he's the guy they're preparing to roll out first when things start to count, at least early in the preseason slate. Or it could mean exactly what Stefanski implied when he spoke to reporters, that the staff is still gathering information before Monday's decision point and simply wanted to see Watson operate at full speed with a clean install behind him one more time before making anything resembling a final call. Coaching staffs don't always explain their rep distribution in real time, and sometimes the explanation only makes sense in hindsight, well after the depth chart is officially set and you can look back and connect all the dots that didn't seem to line up in the moment. What I keep coming back to, over and over, is this. If Cleveland genuinely intends to let this competition play out purely on merit, The numbers from today argue loudly in Sanders' favor. Better completion rate, fewer mistakes, sharper reads by the staff's own public admission. But raw efficiency across a limited number of reps isn't the same evaluation as full command of a starting offense against a real opposing defense in an actual preseason game. And that test is still waiting on the other side of this week for whoever ends up getting the call. Watson brings a level of experience and NFL polish that simply can't be replicated in a walkthrough period or a scripted 7-on-7 session, and coaching staffs value that kind of continuity enormously, especially heading into a live game situation where the margin for confusion shrinks dramatically compared to a controlled training camp environment. There's a version of today where the coordinator's promise this morning wasn't a lie at all, just a plan that got adjusted on the fly once the staff decided internally that they needed one more real look at Watson running the full operation before locking anything in ahead of Monday. There's another version where the messaging to the media and the actual practice plan were simply never aligned to begin with, and that's a communication problem worth watching closely, completely independent of who ultimately wins this job. Either way, the next few days carry real, tangible weight now. Stefanski basically told us Monday is when this competition starts getting decided in earnest, and after a day like today, every single rep between now and then is going to get dissected with this same level of scrutiny. For Sanders specifically, the path forward doesn't actually change much, no matter how frustrating today felt in the moment. Keep being efficient in whatever reps show up on the call sheet. Keep building on the pre-snap and post-snap growth the staff is already crediting him for publicly. And let the operation continue to prove itself over volume and over time, because eventually the sample size gets too large for anyone to explain away with talk of resting a young quarterback or managing his workload. Watson, meanwhile, just put together a full, clean practice with real touchdown production while operating almost exclusively with the starters, which is exactly the kind of workload a veteran needs under him if he's expected to lead this offense into that Bears matchup with real command. I walked away from today genuinely unsettled about what this actually means for the timeline of this entire competition, and I think that's the honest read here, not overreacting in either direction. This is still a real battle for the starting job in Cleveland. It's just one where the coaching staff is clearly still gathering information behind closed doors, and where the version of fairness we expect from a true merit-based quarterback competition doesn't always match the version that actually plays out live on the practice field in front of us. Monday is going to tell us a lot more than today did. Until then, everything we watched out here has to be read as one data point inside a much bigger evaluation, not as the final verdict on who's leading this team out of the tunnel when the lights come on in Chicago.